Bom dia a todos. Bom dia a todos. Se puderem tomar os seus lugares. O Fábio já havia roubado 5 minutos meus, agora nós estamos nós mesmos roubando mais 8. Então, aqueles que não entrarem imediatamente perderão a oportunidade de ver-me mediando alguma, sendo mediador de alguma coisa. Talvez a única oportunidade em que eu vou estar fazendo uma mediação de alguma coisa, né, Fábio? Bom, voltando ao protocolo. Meu nome é Carlos Peixoto e eu estou como presidente do Comitê de Óleo e Gás da Câmara Britânica e como moderador desse painel número 2, Creating... Oh, sorry, I should be speaking in English. Sorry about that. Okay? The panel number 2 is Creating the Energy Transformation, and it should be run from 11 to 12. And this second panel will focus on creating the energy transformation, and will have 1 hour long, and it will be 1 hour long, with presentations from the 2 speakers, who I will introduce to you in a minute, followed by questions and answers in the same format of the first panel. Let me introduce the first speaker, Victor Bomfim. I'll introduce both, and then call you to the stage. Victor Bomfim is a mechanical engineer graduated from Escola de Engenharia Mauá, in São Paulo, in physical oceanography. In physical oceanography from USP, the São Paulo University, with an MBA in management from the COPEAD UFRJ. Victor has extensive experience in subsea engineering segment and over 30 years at Subsea 7. He has been responsible for several projects focused on deep water technologies. Victor has led the company in South America for the last 17 years, reporting directly to Subsea's executive team and board of directors in Europe. Since 2017, Victor has been CEO of Vast Infraestrutura, a Prumo Group company dedicated to providing infrastructure and logistics solutions for liquids for the energy market. Victor also serves as board member for Porto do Açu and Domi, and as an advisory board member of COPEAD UFRJ. And please, Victor, come to the stage. Bruno Chevalier. Bruno has 18 years of experience in the energy sector, plus 7 gigawatts of developed generation projects. 7 gigawatts is a big number. He is currently CEO of Marlim Azul Energia S.A., a JV between Patria Investimentos, Shell, and Mitsubishi, which is developing in Macaé the first thermoelectric with pre-salt gas. Member of the board of directors of Essentia Energia, which is implementing 930 megawatts of solar and wind in Bahia. Associated partner of Patria Investimentos. Midstream business development of Patria Investimentos Infraestrutura Fund, and member of the Abrajet board of directors. He was member of the board of directors of Argo Transmissão de Energia S.A., CEO of Argo Transmissão de Energia S.A., CEO at Parnaíba Gás Natural S.A., and worked for several years as an external consultant for Petrobras in projects such as Gemini acquisition of Liquigás, GSA with Gasmig, JV with Shell for regas terminals, etc. Bruno, please. Okay, let's start with Victor.
Hello. Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the Britcham for the invitation for this panel, and Bruno to be together, me here, and Carlos for being together here in this session. If you can go back, I think you are in slide number 4 or 5 here. If you can go back to the first one, please. All the way. Okay, let's start. Let's see if I manage to work with this one. First I'd like to start by locating ourselves. I mean, Vast Infraestrutura is one of the companies that belong to the Prumo Group. Is one affiliate company of the Prumo Group, 100% owned by Prumo. Prumo by themselves, they are owned by two private equity firms, EIG, an American company based in Washington, with investments in a number of companies in Brazil, Chile, US, worldwide, mainly in the energy sector, and Mubadala, which is sovereign fund from Abu Dhabi. So we are talking about location. We are at Porto do Açu, that has been mentioned here in the previous presentations. And we are in the infrastructure and logistics sector. And when we talk about logistics, location is everything. So we are very well placed on the infrastructure sector in general. Well connected through cabotage, rail, roads, and to the main important region of Brazil, which is the Brazil southeast region. We are very close to the pre-salt polygon, which is important as we have many factories and terminals that serve the oil and gas sector. It's a deep water port, 25 meters deep. Which is something that is remarkable. I saw the other day in the newspapers that the Santos port was doing a huge investment to increase the depth of some of the terminals to 14 meters, and we already have 25 meters water depth, which is critical for some of the operations that we do. We are very close to the oil and gas pipelines that connect the northeast of Brazil to the southeast. I mean, the lines from TAG and NTS, and also the oil network from Petrobras that it's 100 kilometers away from us there in Cabiunas. Also interesting to note that we are in one of the regions, as mentioned by Daniel in the previous presentation, one of the most promising areas for offshore wind. There are 3 areas in Brazil that have been pinpointed for development of offshore wind projects. One is in the south of Brazil, in front of the Minuano, in the northeast of Brazil, there in Ceará, etc. And one the only one in the southeast region is there, just in front of Açu. There are a number of companies that have already requested permits to develop offshore wind projects there in front of Açu, and with the advantage that Açu is close to the consumer center, which is southeast of Brazil, which is truly an advantage. And also we already have a gas power plant there, as mentioned by Adriano here, together in JV with BP. So therefore, with a connection with the LNG, with an LNG terminal, with the potential to receive LNG at the terminal, in addition to the close proximity to the gas pipelines. So this is a pictorial view of the port. For those that have never been there, I really invite you to visit. It's absolutely amazing what we have here. The size of the port is the size of, it's 1 times bigger than the Manhattan Island. It's a huge area, still being developed, where we have a number of operations already in place. Very important to mention that the Porto do Sul is already the second largest port in movement of cargo in tons in Brazil, just after Santos, which is amazing. In Porto do Sul, we move more cargo in tons than Paranaguá, for instance, which is perhaps one of the main ports for export of soya beans. And this is thanks to the development that we have done with some British companies. So we have Ferroport, which is JV between Prumo and Anglo American for iron ore export. With a iron ore pipeline connecting Conceição do Mato Dentro in Minas Gerais to the terminal that we have there, and there in Terminal 1 we have this iron ore terminal as mentioned there. We also have GNA1, which is a JV with BP, another British company, that we have today 1.6 gigawatts already in place, installed and operational. GNA1 power plant. GNA2 is being built as we speak, and will be operational by next year or the beginning of the year after, and with license capacity of already 6.4 gigawatts. So it's a huge terminal with the LNG. With FSRU there for regasification and a regasification terminal. In addition to that, to serve the oil industry, there are other companies that are placed there in Açu. Edson Schwez has the B port, which is a supply-based terminal. We have factories from Technip, NOV, Ocean Pack that has a base there, so on and so forth. But and also we have our JV with BP for marine gas oil to serve the whole terminal and the whole port. The area, there's a lot of area, a considerable area which is still undeveloped, so ready to receive new investments, either in the oil and gas market or in the mines industry or the industry in general, or renewables, as we are going to touch later on. It's good to hear that in the presentation for Shell, for instance, it has been mentioned the MOU that has been signed with Shell for the pilot plant of H2 there in Açu, with an aim perhaps to be connected to future offshore wind projects nearby our site. There is also a solar plant that is being developed with Equinor at the site. So in a sense, Porto do Sul as a whole is a port that is aiming to position themselves as a port that is supporting the oil and gas industry of today, with an aim to becoming a hub for the industry of the future and the energy of the future. Few numbers. It's pretty old numbers, 2020, but it's massive. I mean, the amount of investment that has been made and the size of the terminal. As I mentioned, I mean, in 2020, more than 54 million tons of products have been through the port. As I mentioned, it's the second largest port in Brazil in movement of cargo. So, and is responsible, for instance, more than 30% of the oil which is exported from Brazil is exported out of Açu. And we have, as mentioned, this 1.6 gigawatts already installed, and the second one, the GNA2, being built to be ready. And when it's ready, we will have something like 3 gigawatts of power, LNG power, being produced there at Açu. But I'll talk a little bit about Vast, which is the company responsible for handling liquids at Açu. And as we know, I mean, the energy of today is a considerable portion of the energy of today is handled and is stored as liquids. And there is an a tendency that this is going to continue, being perhaps different liquids, but will still be liquids, and so that's where we are positioning ourselves. So, and here I would like to make a point which I think is important and has been mentioned by both BP and Shell in the previous presentation, which is the fact that the importance of the oil and gas industry in this transition. We are talking about energy transition. So when we talk about transition, we as engineers always think about transitions need to be well planned. So this is one thing, and I think this shock of the Putin's war, the shock that has caused in the overall, let us say, disruption of the supply chain of energy and so on, together with the COVID-19 issue in 2020 and 2021, has certainly teach us a lesson that transitions needs to be made in a very planned way. And I think we of Vast and Portugal Sul as a whole has, let us say, has the understanding of the responsibility that the industry and ourselves have in this transition. So responsibility means guaranteeing the energy during this transition period, and by guaranteeing the energy in this transition period, by the use of the fossil fuels that will be used in the next decades responsibly, with a care to the environment and with the lowest carbon footprint as possible. This is where we are trying to position ourselves, and we believe we are. So, so what we perform, and we have many clients today using our terminal for oil export because of the facility that we have of having 25 meters water depth, so able to accommodate the so-called VLCCs, the very large crude carriers. And why this is important, and why it's important to invest on the sector that we are in. We as Vast, we are in the what is called in the jargon of the industry, in the midstream sector. We are not upstream, we are not downstream, we are midstream. And midstream is very different. I mean, in a sense that in the past, the oil companies used to be part of the midstream industry. With the evolution of the oil and gas industry, midstream became something pretty much separated, with independent companies being responsible for the pipelines, the storage, the tankers, the terminals, so on and so forth. And the role that the midstream industry plays in this transition is very important. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Brazil. These figures are very similar to the ones that shown by Daniel in the previous presentation, and shows here the projections of oil production in Brazil in the coming years. So we are talking about Brazil producing in the range of 3 million barrels per day today, going up to something like 4.8 perhaps, depending on which consultancy company you talk to, by 2035. But the more important is the graph on the right, which is the same graph, but is divided in a different way. Is the dark blue on the bottom is the refining, the volume of the oil which is actually refined in country. So the refinery park of Brazil is there, is what we have. It's unlikely that there will be investments on new refineries. There might be investment on upgrading refineries, but not new refineries. So the volume of oil that will be refined in Brazil is very much constant. So all this growth in production of oil in Brazil will need to be exported. And that's where we are, let us say, pretty much positioned. The terminals that are used for oil export in Brazil are those built by Petrobras in the last century, mainly to import oil from when Brazil was a net importer of oil, that are being used. São Sebastião is still to water oil intake for the refineries in São Paulo, but Angra dos Reis, the big, is mostly being used for oil export. So Brazil needs to invest on infrastructure to handle this massive growth, because when we're talking about exports, Brazil is today exporting stuff like 1.6 million barrels per day, give or take, in average, and we will export 3 million barrels per day in the next 5 or 7 years, and need to do that responsibly. So that's where perhaps our terminal plays a role. It's a terminal in sheltered waters, deep water, with contaminant booms. And in investing on terminals like this, it's very important in order to protect the country from issues like we've seen in the past, the recent past, with the spill in the northeast and etc. So handle oil responsibly with the care to the environment is the responsibility of the midstream industry. I'm still talking about oil exports from Brazil, and another important thing that when I mentioned that in some presentations, it's not totally obvious to the audience, is the fact that out of the 1.6 million barrels per day that Brazil today exports, only half of that is Petrobras. This is a result of the opening of the oil and gas sector in the 90s. And today, half of the oil exported from Brazil, 800,000 barrels per day in average, it's coming from those like Shell, Galp, Repsol, Total, and so on. So it's truly a diversified market already when it comes to oil production and oil export. And Brazil, and also it's important to note that how connected Brazil is to the world. I mean, Brazil exports to Europe, to North America, to the Far East, and hence by being a country that we will export 3 million barrels, we will have to have the right assets in order to handle all this volume. Because as mentioned especially by Shell here in Brazil will continue to be an oil producer because the oil, as mentioned in the previous panel, it has a low carbon footprint. So it will be here. The production is going to grow. Brazil will export oil together with other energies, and so we need to do that responsibly. And that's pretty much where we are investing. So in addition to the terminal, the intent of Vast is to invest on 2 new projects. One is today we have the terminal, but we would like to connect our terminal to a tankage park, or crude oil storage and treatment unit, and to connect the system to the existing pipeline network of Cabiunas, for instance. And in addition to that, we are building a new liquids terminal. With an aim to handle the clean fuels and e-fuels, ethanol, etc., with a view of handling the liquids of today, but position ourselves to be able to handle the liquids of the future. So, for instance, when it comes to ammonia, for instance, that we have mentioned here, and which is, I think, mentioned by Adriano, if I'm not mistaken, is a liquid which is far from being an easy liquid to handle. If this is produced by, let us say, a successful outcome of the project that Shell is putting together there, this ammonia needs to be stored somewhere. It needs to be exported somehow, and this is where we are positioned ourselves to be able to handle liquids, either the liquids of today or the liquids of the future. This is a view of the storage tank the yard that we would like to put together there, that we are planning to do it. And our idea is that the kickoff of the project will take place by early next year. And as I mentioned, this is the liquids hub that we intend to invest on. As mentioned here, Brazil already has a sizable portion of the liquid energy, let's put this way, based on renewable fuels like ethanol or biodiesel and etc. And we are also positioning ourselves to be able that in the future to store and handle like ammonia, SAF, methanol, or biodiesel, and those type of products. And here I would like to make one remark, which this was my last slide. For all of us that are involved in the oil and gas business, is always difficult to, especially the midstream companies, different from the oil and gas producers, to raise the attention of, especially the financial market, the financial institutions, for the importance of investing on the midstream sector. in order to pave the way for the energy transition. So I'll give you an example. Most of the fuel that is consumed in Brazil, clean products like diesel, gasoline, etc., is transported in Brazil using trucks. If you invest in a pipeline, the carbon footprint of this logistics will reduce by 90%. So it's huge. So when we operate transferring a terminal like ours that transfer crude oil using the transshipment in a sheltered area, using, for instance, with avoiding the emission of the volatiles, the VOX, for instance, because we have vapor control. This has also a huge impact, and we are discussing with our clients, Equinor, Shell, and the others, about the importance of have vapor control and not have emissions which much heavier carbon footprint, which is the VOCs can generate. So there is an important need for the industry. I read the other day an article that said that the future of the midstream industry is brown. What does it mean? We're not talking about building new refineries or building new things, but it's very important that the society understands that investing on the existing infrastructure in order to reduce the carbon footprint of what we have is crucial. So having a more, let's say, radical stance that some financial institutions and some investors have of not investing at all in oil and gas might have a huge detrimental effect to the carbon footprint of the industry. So that's where we are. We are in the midstream, independent company, and being brave enough to continue to invest because we believe in the growth of Brazilian oil exports and the importance of Brazil in the energy mix of today and the future. Working responsibly with the liquids of today, but being ready to handle the liquids of the future.
Thank you, Victor. I wrote down here. I should say I visited, and by the way, I visited with Richard, not Richard Taylor, but David Richardson, and it's fantastic. And I agree with you. Someone needs to actually visit the Port of Açu to see how magnificent and the fantastic work that you guys are doing there. And I wrote down here, handling the liquids of today, having in mind and positioning ourselves to handle the liquids of tomorrow. This is a good vision, very good vision. And now let's us hear what Bruno has to say.
All right. Okay. All right, so good morning. Thank you for the invitation. Thank the chamber, and thank Carlos and Victor for being here, and the audience to patiently wait for our discussion here. So it was a nice panel in the morning, a lot of debate, so let's talk a little. Let me see if we can link both presentations, because I agree that Brazil lacks investment in midstream, and the importance of midstream has to be highlighted. So I will use the example of the power plant I'm, let's say, leading the construction as an example in what I suggest can be done in Brazil in order to tackle the, let's say, the name of the panel and of the discussions this morning, because we are talking about energy transition, we are talking about paving this way, we are talking about how to handle it. All right, so I'll use the example of this project and discuss a little about that. So this is a project, is a joint venture by these three companies. Patria is a company which manages funds, infrastructure funds, private equity funds, real estate funds, several funds. Shell is the supplier of the gas as well as a shareholder in the project, has 29.9%. And Mitsubishi was the owner by the time of the auction in 2017 and retained 20% of the project and supplies the power island, the most important equipment, generator, steam turbine, gas turbine, etc. As well as has a long-term contract for the supply of spare parts and maintenance of this power plant for the life of the contract, which is 25 years. The interesting feature of this project is that it is the first to use the gas of the pre-salt. So it was a very ingenious project in the outset, because by that time there were limitations on the level of dispatch of the plants. When you joined an auction, you could only dispatch half of the time, because this limitation was due to the oil and diesel power plants, because of course they are expensive. Therefore, the regulators, they limited to half the time the period within which you could dispatch the plant. So how could we combine that with the nature of the gas of the pre-salt, in which you have to evacuate the gas on a constant flow and avoid this limitation of only operating half the time? So the idea was to use the seasonality in our favor, and therefore, as you know, in the rainy season in Brazil, in the summer, when it rains a lot, the power price goes to the bottom, and usually the operator dispatches the hydro plants because the reservoirs are full. And usually the power plants, they are dispatched during the winter, when it is the dry season, there is less water in the reservoirs, and therefore, in order to complement, keep the reservoirs as well as to complement the power generation, the operator requires the power plants to be dispatched. But if we follow this pattern, which is the usual way in Brazil, we will only dispatch during the dry season, during the winter. And the pre-salt doesn't admit that, because you have to evacuate the gas. So the idea was to do the opposite. We will dispatch during the summer, in theory, when it's not needed, because this was to assure that the power plant would be dispatched, even though the price of the spot price of the power would be low. And then, when the price is up, of course, it will be called and therefore dispatched during the winter, and therefore dispatched the whole year round. So this was a way to overcome a limitation and manage the flow of the gas from the pre-salt, because it's different from LNG, that you call when needed, and usually you still have 2 months by the operator to manage your cargoes, and in this case, no. So by doing that, we could use the gas from the pre-salt, which is an associated gas, first. Second, is a cheap gas. Third, avoids the reinjection, which is a major issue for the IOCs, ANP, the media putting pressure. Why Brazil doesn't use the gas which it has? Is a resource which we have abundant, and at the end, it is almost half reinjected. So the limitations here, as we overcame this limitation, the other limitations are infrastructure in the midstream. So how do we overcome that? So when we did this first project, at the moment is 94% of the construction done. I'll go on just to show how we are. Is already, it takes a while to move up. Is 94% already done. COD, the beginning of 2023, so a few months away. And therefore, what is the other limitation? Because our idea was to expand this project and to put other units. So when we built it, we already foresaw capacity of the gas pipeline for other units, capacity of the transmission line, capacity of the water pipeline, capacity of the whole BOP, the balance of plant, to enable for the expansion. But then we come to this other limitation, which is in this picture, the Rota 2 TCAP, the pipeline in yellow, which the gas arrives in Macaé, where our plant is, but the capacity is taken. There's no extra gas available there. So the Rota 3, the one in green, is being finalized by Petrobras, arrives to Gas Loop, known by Comperj. In theory, capacity taken already by Petrobras, because Petrobras, of course, verticalized the infrastructure and everything. So the issue here is we need more infrastructure, we need more pipelines, otherwise there's no gas available, because our plant is one of the cheapest in the system. Therefore, the price of the electricity in Brazil falls when we are demanded, because it's very cheap fuel, the gas from the pre-salt. It's very efficient plant, is the newest power island which exists in capacity and efficiency. One unit of ours is bigger than the one in Açu. I know well because from my 7 gigawatts of project, which you commented, majority were in Neva or Açu, which I worked in the past, so I know well. And so how do we enable that this gas comes to shore and that we expand and we use one asset that Brazil has? And how do we help that? Because we need power, okay. We need all our sources of power. That's something that we have to understand. So we need renewables, we need the wind, we need solar, we need biomass. Brazil is big in all of those and is growing. The per capita demand is increasing worldwide, in Brazil the same. We have nuclear limited. Hydro now is difficult to obtain the permits because of floods, forests, reservoirs, runoff river is possible, but it's normally expensive and inefficient, like Belo Monte, for example. Therefore, we have to use all our sources. Okay, we have water in the north, we have wind and solar in the northeast, we have gas in the southeast. Why not use to our benefit in the regions where they are in a cost-effective manner all the sources, and we generate power that we need. So the idea is let's use this gas in a transition period, because if you talk about in 30 years' time, probably there's no more use for this gas or this oil. Technology is moving in a fast pace. And if we don't incentivize this to be built, this infrastructure to be built, and those blocks to be developed, at the end we will remain with those assets underneath the sea. Therefore, how can we help do other projects such as this one, which is cheap, which generates royalties, which generates a series of suppliers, employment, and so on. So there are several ways, but the way the power market is structured and the regulation is structured, it doesn't match the gas market or the gas industry. And if we wait, what has happened in the last several years will remain the same, which is the projects, I'm talking about the electricity sector, using this gas. Of course, the industry at the moment is paying a high price for the gas and is a very good customer to the gas industry. But the electricity market, the consumption is very big for this gas, is immediate, and it can generate power at a very affordable price. Therefore, if we match those agendas and we link the electricity sector with the gas sector, it is possible to deploy new projects. I'll give an example. Equinor, Shell, they have new projects, and they usually wait the FID on those projects to assure the demand for those gas, and because when the gas is associated, usually, of course, is the oil which prevails. But there are fields in which they are mostly gas and not associated gas. And therefore, to give the FID, you need to be sure about the demand. And the demand, you need to foster this demand because the organic growth takes a while. And therefore, why not, for example, regionalize the auctions? Why not separate the fuels? Why not foster the development of the gas industry? And by doing that, you have this twofold benefit, which is having cheap energy available with our own resources without depending on exchange rate, importation, and so on. At the same time, you develop new gas fields, new midstream infrastructures. So it has this mutual benefit. And I know that whenever we have a system to change this, it's cumbersome. But on the other hand, if we don't think on how to improve what we have today and how to benefit the industry, so my concept here is the gas, it is important in the transition. Brazil is already, of course, much beyond the international talk about the transition, because in the developed world, you have a lot of coal in the US, a lot of nuclear in France, you have a lot of oil in many countries. So going to the gas is a big benefit. Here, in the electricity sector, Brazil is already 80% renewable, either with solar, wind, hydro, biomass. So the gas will play a limited role. We are talking about maybe 15% of the matrix, so not more than that. But it has the big advantage of being dispatchable, of not depending on natural circumstances like the wind or the sun or the rain. So it stabilizes the system. It is secure. and it uses our own resources, our own gas. And the majority nowadays is the pre-salt, but we have gas not only in the pre-salt, we have onshore, we have offshore. So the idea here is that by changing the regulation, we would foster, but when we discuss that with the authorities, usually they come with some arguments. First, that when you leave all the fuel sources competing against each other, in theory, the lowest price prevails. But the lowest price in a competition which is not fair, for example, there are subsidies for wind or for solar, or the project goes in the north, the consumption is in the southeast. And then the transmission lines are not in that account. Therefore, there are hidden prices or hidden subsidies which alter this true competition between sources. And I agree that we have to try to foster the cheapest price of energy possible. But in the last 18 years, since 2004, we have central auctions from the federal government, always for the lowest price, but the price of the power increased manifold. And that is not only inflation or taxes. It's also because there are other charges in the account. So there are payments which are done, like CDE, CCC, and others, which make the price of the power more expensive. So it's not only, the only measurement is not only the final price of the auction, but the true cost of the power to the consumer afterwards, including all the charges, including all the taxes, including the other costs. For example, transmission line, like Santo Antônio and Girau, big hydros in the north of Brazil, in Rondônia, but they are connected to São Paulo. So for the system, they are southeast projects, even though they are in Rondônia. But 2,000 kilometers of transmission line, this doesn't count. This is a separate account. So it's like that provisional measure 579 that President Dilma enacted, that no, it will artificially lower the price of the power because the Brazilian treasury is paying for that. So there's no lowering the price when someone else is paying. The price is the same or even more expensive. So this is what it has to be challenged in my point of view. So we have to foster the development of Brazilian asset. The gas is important in the transition. That doesn't mean diminishing the efforts in terms of the solar plants, the wind plants, the biomass. By all means, they should be developed. They will grow. They are competitive. It's a great industry. Brazil has naturally those resources. But that doesn't mean that we shall not foster the use of the gas, not only to develop the infrastructure, but also to lower the electricity power. So that is what I wanted to bring as message here. How to do this transition in an efficient manner, but that requires us, Brazilians, the knowledge, and we should fight for what we believe, fight for what is right, and try to improve what we have. And I believe that this would add a lot to the system in terms of competitiveness as well as security. Thank you.
Fantastic, fantastic, Bruno. I wrote here. I mean, if you go to Macaé on the highway, not on the Via Lagos, and you turn on exit 169, after 5 kilometers, you see a big construction. It's amazing what you guys are doing there. It's remarkable. And I wrote here, creating demand for the pre-salt gas. This was pretty clever. This was a fantastic solution. And we take your position on changes that need to come so that we become more efficient. And thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much for your presentation as well. We have a few minutes before I call Clarice. We have a few minutes for questions. Does anybody want to ask a question? Fabio, please. Oh, if anybody brings a mic, I will take the.
I think I'm going to make the question that I was going to, Fabio Caldas, right, Britcham. I'm going to make the question that I was going to make in the first session. So it's about regulations. It's a general question, regulation and incentivization. Is everything in place in terms of regulation? Is there any game changing, for you? Midstream has been looked down a little bit in the last 10 to 20 years. You talked a little bit about it. How's it going? The question's for both. Is it going all right? Or is there anything that needs to be changed? Any game changing in midstream? That's the question, Peixoto.
I will give you 1 minute to each of the panelists to address the questions. Please.
Well, there are thousands and thousands of things that needs to be addressed. I mean, the oil and gas industry in Brazil has been, the regulation, the framework, and perhaps there's people that know this much better than I do, but was put together with a view when Petrobras was responsible for absolutely everything, from production to transportation to refining, etc. So, and Petrobras was part of the government. So now that after the opening, when you have multiple players, you need to define the boundaries. You need to define who is responsible for what. What's the role of the agency? What's the role of the government? There's a huge amount of effort to be put in place, and I think there were some important developments in the gas industry with the Lei do Gás and etc. Things that have changed and have evolved. But for instance, in crude oil, has not even started. There's a lot of discussion about regulations regarding the access to terminals. Petrobras it's now selling some of their refiners. They have sold Hirano to Mubadala, and they have sold the refinery in Amazonas, etc. And the transition, the borderlines are far from being well regulated, and there's room for litigation discussions and etc. So it's something that definitely the industry needs to pay attention. A number of points where there are too many regulations for one thing, and the points where there's no regulation at all. So yes, I mean the industry and IBP with Roberto, who was here, is putting a lot of effort on trying to regulate somehow these interfaces. But with the opening of the market that I have mentioned already existing in the production, it's becoming a reality on gas, midstream, and etc. There is a huge need for better regulation to have more surety on, and to give the security that investors would need for putting money on the sector in Brazil.
Okay, I'll give you two examples of regulation needed. For example, in this project, we built a 22-kilometer gas pipeline to connect the TECAB, the gas treatment unit of Petrobras in Macaé, to our power plant. And we had to negotiate the land throughout this 22 kilometers with several owners, landowners. And if that was a transmission line, ANEL, the electric agency of the electric sector, would issue a declaration of public utility because there's a federal project which preference in the power sector, and in case you don't reach an agreement, you discuss, you can litigate based on how much you pay to indemnify. Okay, that's the way you do it. In this case, in this gas pipeline, ANP only, let's say, has the authority if it is a transport pipeline. If it is a distribution pipeline, it's the state. In this case, was neither the transport nor the distribution. So we went to the electric agency, ANEL, and said, look, we have this pipeline, this part of the power plant, and I have to build it, and I want you to consider analogically like the transmission line, and you allow me to do it and issue this declaration of public utility. And ANEL denied. We appealed, denied again. So the second time we appealed, we had to work with the directors, and one of the directors said, I think you have a merit, but the other directors don't recognize that because it's the first time. So we have to convince them steadily. By the time that was done, we had negotiated with everyone that was built. But at the same time, it was a precedent for future power plants. So from now on, a gas pipeline built for a power plant is considered by the electric agency as part of the power plant. Of course, because without the field, there's no power generation. It's something obvious, but you have to, let's say, fight to obtain your rights. So this is something that a project, in theory, nothing new about that, but is one, let's say, one side of the negotiation in Brasilia, federal government. Let's talk about the state of Rio de Janeiro. I'm Carioca, proud of being Carioca, but I recognize that's a very tough state to do business in Rio. So then with the state, well, we want to build it. No, it's the concessionaire which is going to build it. Fine, it has to build within the deadline I have because I need this. I have this pipeline and I need to generate power. So at the end, well, the concessionaire only builds in case the concessionaire has an amendment to the concession contract, which is for a number of years. So the state has to give an amendment to increase for the concessionaire to invest in the capex of the pipeline. But if the state allows that, that means that my gas in my kitchen, in my flat in Flamengo, will pay higher price because the price will go up because we are, in theory, as a state, as the population of the state, subsidizing the construction of a gas pipeline for a power plant, which doesn't make sense whatsoever. So at the end, we built. Now we are negotiating with the state agency the fees for the operation of this pipeline, not yet decided. So there's a risk of how that's going to be operated, how much will that cost. The regulation of the state doesn't allow that. In the state of Espírito Santo, they already approved. And that is not because the new gas law was changed recently. This is not in line with the gas law of 2009. So it's not updated. And now there's already a new law. So, and we are still discussing this, right? How to operate, what is the TUST, the fee you pay. So when you build a project such as that, you have to think 360 degrees, and you have to challenge many things, and there are new fights. So the regulation has to be improved in many ways. So I just gave you 2 examples in this project, but there are many more examples.
Gentlemen,
That's done.
thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Now, please, Clarice, may you please take the stand for the next panel? Thank you very much.
Bom dia. Tá? Bom dia a todos. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. After so many years working with the British Chamber as part of the Oil and Gas and the Energy Committee, I've been invited for this position as Vice President of the British Chamber here in Rio, and I'm very proud to be participating here with you, so thank you for the kind invitation. Talking about invitation, I've asked the Chamber if I could extend an invitation. We are hosting the UK Pavilion at the Rio Oil and Gas now in September. And I would like to invite you all not only to visit the companies that are part of the UK Pavilion, but also to taste a little bit of the whiskey tasting. It's going to be an open event to all on a Tuesday at 5 p.m. So we will circulate the invitation, and we have a networking reception on Wednesday evening as well. So this is just a kind sample to share with you all. Now with my duties today. So now this is the third and last panel. Thanks for bearing it with us. And on this panel, we'll focus on the impact of changing energy demands. And we'll have 1 hour for a presentation from Anglo American representative, followed by questions and answers. So please make your questions on the panel. The questions can be made live over the microphone, or if you prefer, it can be written and sent to us. So now I'm going to introduce our speaker for today, André Hirano. André holds a bachelor's degree in metallurgical engineering from the University of São Paulo, and he has 15 years of experience in process development in the steel industry. He currently leads decarbonization and alternative energy projects for the mining at Anglo American. André Hirano, I invite you to take a seat, please. Yes.
Okay, guys, good afternoon, everyone. It's a big pleasure to be here, especially after this rich presentation that we have so far. So it's a big pleasure to me. Thank you, Clarice. Thank you to invitation to be here. It's a nice opportunity. I think from my position as a mining representative, my intention here is just to give you the ideas and all the things that we are, as a mining company, are doing concerning all this changing energy demand and decarbonization and energy consumption. Okay, thank you. So, who we are? Anglo American is a global mining company. We are in the top five or four biggest companies in the mining in the world. We have operations in a lot of countries. We will mention better in the next slide. But our main ambition is to reimagining the mining to improve the people's lives. And let me comment where we have operations. Globally, we have basically in Latin America operations in Niquelândia, Barro Alto is a nickel operations. Codemin is a nickel also operations. In Conceição do Mato Dentro, we have iron ore operations, is concentrated, pellet feed to the steel making plants. And we had our head offices in Belo Horizonte. And also in Latin America, we have operations of copper, especially in Chile, Peru, and Colombia, represented by them. It's a very huge representation in Latin America. In South Africa, we have operation of platinum, diamonds, and iron ore, sinter and lump as well. In the other side of the world, Australia, we have producing of steel-making coal to attend all the steel-making operations around the world. So, what you're committed to? We have our ESG strategy, but I will put more focus in our climate exchange. Anglo American, as the most part of the companies, we are committed to reduce around 30% of our emissions in terms of scope 1 and 2. And not only that, but we are aiming to have a completely carbon neutral in 8 plants of our Anglo American sites. So we are selecting these plants. So we intend to achieve this neutrality up to 2030 to these 8 operations. Besides that, we are aiming thinking our scope 3, because later we will comment. We have, as a mining company, our scope 3 is very challenging to achieve, but we're focusing to reduce around 50% to 2040, together with the complete neutrality in this year. Okay, just to give a very overview about our idea to carbon neutrality. Well, we have a lot of homework to do. And basically, when you compare the mining companies with oil and gas and steel making, we are very rustic operation. We don't have a history. Mining company doesn't have so digitalization, automation aspect compared with steel plants or oil and gas. So we are doing all this homework to provide IoT, artificial intelligence, using drones to monitoring our feedstock. We contracted 2 years ago a deep dive assessment to evaluate all the opportunities that we have to apply in our company in order to look into alternatives to use alternative fuels. We have from this 2022 green energy contract. We are 100% we're supplied by green energy. We will comment later. Well, when we look just to our operations in Brazil, Minas Rio and nickel. Minas Rio is based in Conceição do Mato Dentro. We have operations to produce pellet feed to attain the market from blast furnace and direct reduction world. We have a very high-grade product. It's very interesting because when you compare with other mining companies on the market, we can provide very high grades to get this green steel is a trend so far. So in general, we have some steps. We're thinking into looking to HVO as a replacement to a conventional diesel to our trucks, off-road trucks, and to put electrification to our buses, to employees. In our operation in Chile, they already done this. And of course, we are looking to possibility to offset in operation. And then I will show you other examples like that. When we see in our nickel operation, it's a different way of operation because in nickel, to produce nickel, we use a pyrometallurgy process. It's a high temperature process. I mean, on that plant, we use thermal coal. So it's a big challenge to us in order to neutralize. So we are thinking to how to replace this kind of fuel. And then we have a lot of opportunities. For example, we use biomass because we have big farms in North Aranha. We're looking for alternative to use hydrogen also, but in this operation is very complicated, it's very disruptive operation because use hydrogen in the steel making operation is more, let's say, knowledge they have. To non-ferrous is more difficult. Electrification of fruits, of course, HVO to our trucks. And we will comment better later, but we are planning to implement a biochar process in order to get some source of different biomass to supply our process. In Anglo American, we incentivize to promote use of startup to innovation. So we have a program to launch a challenge, and then we ask them to apply and is trying to solve one. Then after 3 months, we receive, let's say, a proof of concept, and then that comes a lot of great opportunity to invest, and then we are doing that. I think is a very nice opportunity to receive these different topics from the market and from the R&D departments. Besides that, we have a technical and sustainability group. Is all over the world, in Anglo America, located in Brazil, in South Africa, and Australia. It's an Anglo American corporate technical group, and we changed a lot of information, and we did discussions to try to develop what we are doing, the best practices in the mining around the world. Comment about our source of energy. I just comment that we are 100% clean. We 2 years ago we signed the energy supply with Tietê, Atlas, and Casa dos Ventos, wind energy, hydraulic, and solar. But specifically in Casa dos Ventos, we share this asset. We invest a good amount of money to help them to develop, to build the wind park. And then we consider self-production to that part of the generation that we are demanded. So we're very proud to be solved this part of Scope 2 emissions. Well, let's start to comment what we are doing concerning the alternative fuels. We're looking to alternative possibility to replace our conventional diesel in our trucks. We're studying a possibility to use HVO. Of course, it's a big challenge because HVO is not produced in Brazil. We are expecting to receive some samples, but we are in strong conversation with some production suppliers. And we're planning to do some trials in bench tests. We're contracting some laboratories to do that. And we expect in the beginning of next year to make some industrial tests in our trucks in Conceição do Mato Dentro in the first moment, and the second moment in Niquelândia. So if everything goes well, we're planning to make this ramp-up curves replacement using some blend or HVO and conventional diesel. So, of course, I think my colleagues here from the supplier companies could clarify better than me, but HVO, we don't have a legislation done in Brazil, so we have a challenge to logistics and procurement. So I think we need the support of my colleagues or suppliers how to receive this clean biogas to use in our operations. That's very nice. Hydrogen, this topic is very, very common nowadays for other companies. In South Africa, in our operation in Anglo America, this year was launched a truck moved completely by hydrogen. So we're the first off-road truck launched in the world. So it's a very proud to Anglo America also to launch. If you put in YouTube Anglo America hydrogen trucks, you will see a documentary showing completely stage since the birth of the idea up to the trials. And then we intend to bring to our operations in Brazil, Chile, and Latin America the use of this hydrogen, of course, in parallel with other initiatives in order to replace the conventional fuel. This first trial was launched in Mongalaguena. It's a platinum plant in South Africa. Okay, talking about hydrogen, just a picture. The truck that I just commented is a 2 megawatts hydrogen battery hybrid trucks, generating more power than the diesel predecessor. So the capacity is around 290, 300 tons, 2 tons of payload. Was very, very interesting. Please check in YouTube. We will like about what we see. Thinking in hydrogen use in the process, as I comment, hydrogen is a good opportunity to replace coal, because in this pyrometallurgy, okay, let's continue. In pyrometallurgy, you use, let's say, 10-20% of metallurgical thermal coal to produce the concentrate of nickel. So the idea that we're planning to study is how to apply the hydrogen as alternative reducing agent to replace the heavy oil that we use in our ignition plant, and the second stage to completely changing of our consumption of coal. So as I mentioned, in steel making operations conventional, they use coke and coal, PCI injection and blast furnace, but to a non-ferrous industry is very disruptive because nobody knows how to do. We don't have any technical paper published before, so for us it's a very innovation area of knowledge, and we're very motivated how to promote this into the kiln furnace. And then again, okay. I mentioned about the biochar. One other important project that we have is because in Goiás we have a big farm of forestry of eucalyptus, and we have already used as a wood chip. We process the eucalyptus, we produce the wood chip, we supply to kiln furnace in Codemin, is a Niquelândia operation. So one of the other initiatives that we have to use part of this asset to produce this biochar using this pyrolysis plant. Let me comment better here. The idea is to use our current feedstock, biomass, eucalyptus, but not only that, to try to complement with some waste from the agriculture local farms. The idea is to produce 3 big products: biochar, to make some revenue, to get carbon credits with that, to use biogas that could be sent to generate more energy, or even to be sent again to our furnace and to replace to the heavy oil that we have done using already so far. And the big bio oil, that other great opportunity, we have to process it and generate the tar that could be again burn and generate energy, or we can send this wood vinegar to cosmetics market. Is a very huge, of course, market that we have. So we are in stage of conceptual study, and we're planning to deliver this project maybe in 2 or 3 years. It's provided by Modulus. Okay, thinking in decarbonization of our mining value chain. I think here is one of the biggest change to the mining companies, because this is very interesting comparison, because when you see the mining, the major mining companies, scope 1, 2, and 3. As you can see, scope 1 very tight together with scope 2, but scope 3, the speeds are more than 95%. What is that? It's all the impact that our product, our raw materials causes in the steel makers, for example, because steel makers, they consume a lot of metallurgical coal. So how we need to do to help them to reduce this? It's not so simple. We have to be very close to all the initiatives, not only to the mining, but together with the customer, the steel makers, to help them how to use the best quality as we can provide to them in terms of iron ore quality, or even we listed some initiatives, almost 15, 16 initiatives, and of course we need to help them how to assess, to use hydrogen in their blast furnaces, how to use probably CCUS as other equipment to capture carbon, and of course instrumentation, automation, again, IoT is very impacted to achieve the optimization of the fuel rate in these steel industries. Just one example to the reality what the steel makers are facing, because when we see the intensity of tons of CO2 per tons of crude steel emitted, we see that most part is coming from the steelmaking coal. So in the future, is a natural movement that will happen is to replace this coal by hydrogen, or prior to the biomass. I think in Brazil, depending on how the steel position, is complicated the logistic part to take the huge amount of biomass to, for example, to Rio de Janeiro, to bring from Goiás or Minas Gerais is not so easy. But I think in the very long term, what will be very disruptive to the steel making is how to access the lower, the high amount of hydrogen and a lower cost, because this will be very important to we have a, let's say, a changing of process from the conventional blast furnace to the target to revert to the direct reduction process. Okay, looking to the future and present. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, André. It's impressive to see when you pass through all the challenges, and then you make us realize that this is just a small part of the challenge. The biggest challenge is with the steelmaker. So a big path away. We're going to open now for questions. So not everyone at the same time, please. One at a time. That's okay. So if you're too shy, we have one. I knew you would support us. It has to be Peixoto.
Even though I'm a
I
very
had one
shy
ready
person.
Here.
Thank you for your presentation. Very, very innovative. We know that Anglo American have this 560 kilometers pipeline to
Across 33 towns.
It's from Minas Gerais to, and you have in one of my visits to the Porto do Açu, I saw you have this cyclonic separation unit to separate the water and take them.
Yes, the filtration plant.
The mining products, and then you treat the water into specs required by IBAMA to put it back into the sea. Do you guys have any plans to use that water, to split it up and have that into the hydrogen projects that are being thought about?
Always opportunity, yes. Without nothing ongoing yet under discussion about this question, but we strongly believe that if Porto do Sul could be a huge hub of this utility, green utility, probably in terms of decarbonization in scope 3, as I just mentioned, if we have some verticalization on downstream plant, for example, there, a pelletizing plant or HBI plant, we can take advantage, take opportunity to use this source of water to generate probably hydrogen or other sources. So in Porto do Sul, we believe we have a strong opportunity to any other verticalization to Anglo American. It's not in our plans nowadays, but thinking in how to assess this world of green steel, probably a verticalization plant in Porto do Sul will be very important for us.
I'm sure this is music to the ears of some players here.
But we need to low-cost hydrogen, please.
That's always the challenge, isn't it? I reckon, well, feel free to ask any other questions, just raise the hand and the microphone will come to you. But two things from your presentation that made me think here. One is you mentioned that in the mining industry there isn't so much of what you see in the oil and gas industry. So what do you think could be a synergy between those two markets to help your industry to achieve its targets? So how do you think I don't know if it's the supply chains of the technology, how can we make them work together if there are things that are already existing perhaps in one industry to bring to the other?
Yes, I think besides all the discussion to provide clean utilities to suppliers, but in terms of technology, I think oil and gas is a very, very highest position concerning the steel and mining companies. I think if you think in to make some synergy, all this experience to the oil and gas company could help us, is already helping in some initiatives to help to develop our digitalization and automation aspect, because we believe if we have well-treated data, so we can optimize in our process and to achieve lower consumption of fuel, of course. But no doubt, I think the mining companies, we have this homework to getting better our treatment of data, to access the better results.
Okay. And the other comment I was going to make, I saw huge investments, for example, from Fortescue, tradition in this area of mining, on the plans for hydrogen here in Brazil, in the Porto Pecém in the northeast. Is there any plans for Anglo American to also invest in such a thing? Or you did mention a little bit of hydrogen investment inclusion in the portfolio. How do you see Anglo American moving?
Yes, not to invest directly in this moment, but to understand how to consume in our operations. Because as I commented you before, when you see the reality of the steel plants, conventional, they're not using yet the hydrogen, but they know how to do it. They only need to have a lower cost hydrogen available. In our case, we work in the nickel operation, for example, is a non-ferrous processing, pyrometallurgy. We need to understand how to apply in process, because it's not very unconventional. It's very disruptive, because you know to understand how to impact to, let's say, to replacement ratio between the coal to the hydrogen, for example. So it's a big challenge, and we're looking to do how to achieve this target, but we're doing in the future, no doubt.
That's good to hear. Okay, do we have any other questions from the audience? No. If not, then I have to say my thank you, Andrea, for being here with us today and sharing your knowledge and all the challenges and the achievements of Anglo American. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, coming up next, to close the event, bear with us for a few minutes more. So to bring us an overview of the topics covered today and the latest news on the energy transition, we'll have in the next 25 minutes the participation of Roberto Ardenghy. I think it doesn't need introductions, but it's also nice to cover everything he's been involved with in the past years. So he's a specialist in energy, oil and gas, and sustainability with more than 35 years of experience. Ardenghy is a former diplomat who held various senior positions in the Brazilian government, at the Presidency of the Republic, the National Petroleum Agency, the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, Justice Development, as well as the embassies and consulates of Brazil in Washington, Buenos Aires, Houston, and New York. In the private sector, he served as a director of BG Brazil, and he was the first chief institutional and sustainability officer of Petrobras, with responsibility over the areas of external relations, communication, communities, and social impact and environment. Under his leadership, Petrobras positioned itself to tackle climate change. He holds a degree in law and a postgraduate degree in oil and natural gas, and a master's degree in diplomacy and international relations. He's currently the president of the Brazilian Institute of Oil and Gas, IBP, and the board member of the Brazil United States Chamber of Commerce in Houston, New York, and Rio de Janeiro. So, Roberto Ardenghy, thank you very much to be with us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fabio and Britcham, for inviting me for this closing session. And it has been an amazing morning we had here. And when you see all those solutions and how technology is playing such an important role in this path to a better energy, to a more decarbonized way of living, it's amazing what we have seen, and I really congratulate you for putting together such an amazing program. Let me give you maybe my views and the view of the Brazilian Petroleum Institute when we see this new wave of needs and means in terms of energy. Today we talk a lot about the energy transition, but especially after what happened in Europe last year, people are also talking a lot about energy security and maybe now energy poverty. Those three pillars are very important to take into consideration. What's happening right now in Europe when you see the European countries struggling to lower the bills, the energy bills of every household in different countries in Europe, you see how this concept of energy poverty is also important, because the consumer, the person that uses energy, he wants affordability, he wants reliability, and he wants cheap energy, because that's the way that he's accustomed to. I think that the oil and gas has played a very important role in providing this kind of energy, because when you see the history of the world, the last 200 years, you see first the coal, and then the coal was a key part for industrial revolution, especially in UK and other parts of Europe, providing a very important source of energy. And then, step by step, the coal has been replaced by the so-called fossil fuels, oil, and then natural gas. Why is that? Why 80% of this room here, why the chair that you are sitting, the floor, the microphone that everybody is using here, and different things, the tag that you are using is basically made of some byproduct of oil. 80% of the things done in this industrial society we live is made with some form of fossil fuel byproduct. This is very important because this is a way of living. So change this is very difficult. Change this is quite something, especially when you consider this idea of energy poverty and the cost of the things. Today in the world, just in Africa, 500 million people have no access to any form of energy. 500 million people in Africa. And maybe hundreds of here in Latin America and in Asia have the same situation. So how we are going to deal with that? We are going to alienate those people with some form of energy transition that is going to be important, is going to be make sense in the current world, but it's going to be very, very expensive. So I think that one concern we must have is how we are progress in this path, and it's a mandatory path. There is no other way that you have other than surpass the fossil fuels in the future. The fossil fuels, they play a very important role in terms of global warming. This is recognized by every oil company in the world. But how we are going to do that? And maybe it's what Monique, in the representing Shell, mentioned, that we need flexibility. We need different approaches. We need some kinds of new energies, new ways of doing things, but also improve the efficiency, improve the way we are doing the traditional things, the so-called decarbonization of our current activities, and bringing more efficiency for how we are using the current system of energy we have settled in the world. If you take the whole world right now, you have $23 trillion. Let me repeat this number. $23 trillion of assets that are directly related to oil and gas activities, refinings, shipyards, drilling rigs, FPSOs, wells, and pipelines, trucks, and etc. So what are we going to do? We are going just to get rid of those assets and say, hey, let's have another $23 trillion here in the economy to have a new form of energy coming. It's not going to happen like this. So I think that the rule of the game are approach that brings together different ways, different forms of dealing with the situation. And that's what we see at the Brazilian Petroleum Institute, and we see at oil and gas. There is a large room for bringing more efficiency, bringing more decarbonization to the current operations. Because when you study, for instance, the so-called Paris agreements that have been so-called in these energy transition discussions. The Paris agreements, they don't talk about net zero. They talk about reducing the amount of the emissions in the world. That's the rule of the game. We're not talking, because the emission is a fact of life. We emit CO2 in every aspect of our daily life. But what we have to do is to decrease, step by step, the amount of emissions that we put in the nature, because this is creating harm to the way of live, and the planet is suffering a lot. So when you saw this situation, we saw the idea of the decarbonization, the idea of having and bringing more technology and innovation to the game. And that's what we heard here from the previous speakers, talking a lot about the new ways of using energies, not just new forms of energy, but also in traditional forms. Let me just give you an example. We have in the world approximately 300 million engines that are power generation for industrial use. Fabric plants all over the world, they have power plants that are located there, and they produce energy for the daily life of industrial use. 300 million of these engines. If we do something around bringing more efficient to this kind of equipment, we are going to decrease the amount of energy, or the amount of emissions related to what has happening in Europe right now. So the whole consumption of Europe will be compensated by this kind of technology that will improve the efficiency of engines around the world. Just to give an example. So there is a lot of inefficiency when we talk about the use of energy, and I think that this thing has to be also in the game. I brought just a couple of slides here to talk to you about that, and I'd like to showcase one aspect of this discussion, that is Brazil. Brazil is very well positioned when you talk about lowering the carbon intensity of because that is the rule of the game. In the future, when a client will come to oil and gas producer, he will ask this company, how much you sell this oil or this gas? Oh, this oil, the barrel I sell you for you $80. Oh, great, good price. But tell me, how much carbon have you emitted to produce this oil? And if you don't have a good answer for that, you are going to be replaced by somebody else. There is so what's going to happen in the future is what we call segmentation of the market. Market is going to a more low carbon kind of product. Because, why is that? Because this company that's going to buy your oil, he has to comply with some rules another place that are directly related to the famous scope 3 that we talk a lot. So that is the way that we see the future coming for oil and gas. We have a lot of still amount of oil that's going to be produced and consumed. All the estimates, when you see the reports from the International Energy Agency and other organizations, you see that the oil and gas will continue to be consumed broadly in the world. But which kind of oil and which kind of gas? A decarbonized product, because this is going to be, and step by step, being replaced by oil. So what we are doing in Brazil in terms of all-electric FPSOs, the high SEP, the technologies that are applied and developed, some of them including in Brazil, are very important for preparing us for this future, because we are going to have a lot of activities coming in the market. So I'm going just to finish first, talking a lot about this decarbonizing. So Brazil stands out very, very, very proud in this area. To today the average CO2 that you produce to produce a barrel of oil is around 30 kilos. So in the average world, if you have a barrel of oil, you produce 30 kilos of CO2. In Brazil, we have projects that are producing just 10 kilos per barrel. So very good numbers, and we have to improve that over the future, because that's the way that we see the world progress. So a balanced vision when you have new energies coming and improving the efficiency, improving the decarbonization of your existing production of oil and gas is how we see the future progressing. And we are prepared for this. I just took this image from the old Globo today, that Europe is looking for opportunities in terms of oil and gas. If you travel to Europe today, you are going to be asked by the taxi driver, hey, you have gas to sell to my country, because everybody is looking for some options in terms of energy. Are we prepared for that? Yes, I think that Brazil has a lot of potential. We had a lot of opportunities. Of course, we do have a challenging, but I think that if we organize ourselves, if we are able to create a business-friendly environment in which companies can produce, can explore the resources we have in Brazil in terms of hydrocarbons, either gas or oil, I think that we can seize this opportunity. There is a big opportunity now because of the geopolitics in the world for Brazil and for other countries in Latin America, like Argentina, Colombia, Bolivia. But we have to develop a well-structured organization in terms of rules and rule of law. But if you want to see more about that, I'm going to finish by inviting you to come to us at the end of September. We have a conference here in Rio de Janeiro that is the Brazilian oil and gas show, the Rio Oil and Gas Show. I don't know if you can pass it. It's a small video we have about this opportunity. I invite you all to come to Rio Oil and Gas.
Nós vemos um mar de possibilidades e a oportunidade de desbravar novos caminhos. Vemos um amanhã de desenvolvimento sustentável e um futuro repleto de conexões com a sociedade. E vemos você ao nosso lado nessa jornada de progresso e inovação. É para celebrar os novos horizontes que a Rio Oil and Gas 2022 vai aportar no Pier Mauá. Programe-se para embarcar em nossa edição híbrida, que juntará os encantos do evento físico com todas as modernidades do evento digital. Um novo formato, em uma nova data e em um novo local. Afinal, o amanhã só tem espaço para o novo. E você, vem com a gente?
So we will have a lot of discussions around innovation, around technology, and also around one topic that I think it's very, very important, that is attracting young generations for our business. Unfortunately, in some circles, especially younger circles, they don't see us as a good place for working. They see us as an old kind of sector, But in fact, everything is depending on this sector. I mean, if you don't attract people that are able to provide those technologies, those innovations, we will have a big problem in the future. So one of the pillars of this coming Rio Oil and Gas is attracting younger generation. We have an arena where discussion with students. We are bringing a lot of schools and universities to the table. So we want to make sure that we show them how interesting it is for younger people to come to this sector and work with us. So that was my message. Ana and Flávio, gracias, thank you very much for the opportunity, and it was a pleasure, and congratulations for the program. I think that we had an amazing morning today with a lot of information, and I'm very happy to be the one that is closing this session. Thank you very much.
Okay, firstly, Roberto, thank you very much for those words. Couldn't agree with you more about the challenges Roberto mentioned now about bringing on the next generation to be part of this solution. I think mirrored very much the words of Adriano as well when I talked about the changing skill sets. I think it's absolutely critical. So look, I'm fully aware I'm literally standing between you, your empty stomachs, and lunch. So I will be really quick here, but it would be remiss of me not to thank once again everybody who was involved in this seminar. So firstly, Firjan, for providing this wonderful location for us. Isn't it great to be back in a physical location, not looking at a screen? So thank you, Firjan. Our sponsors, BP, that were represented by Adriano Bastos today, Shell, represented by Monique Gonçalves, and the UK government. Without these sponsors, all of us would be sat at our desk looking at a screen right now. So thank you very much to these sponsors. Again, the support of Firjan and EIC, represented by Clarice here. Thank you for your support of the event. And the other speakers today. So Daniel Hiller from Subsea 7, Victor Bomfim, ex-Subsea 7 and now Vast, Bruno Chevalier from Marlim Azul, Hirano from Anglo American, and Roberto, who we just heard. Also Clarice Rocha, in her role as the Vice President. Thank you, Clarice, for your support. Fabio Caldas, Renato is not here, but Fabio and Renato are the President and Vice President of the Power and Renewables Committee, and Carlos Peixoto and Vladimir, who are the President and Vice President of the Oil and Gas Committee. And I know the amount of work you put into this event, so thank you very much, and what a success it was. Fantastic. And finally, the Britcham executive team. They've come all the way from Sao Paulo yesterday, camped out here basically last night, slept here setting everything up. Fabrício, Clara, Tamides, thank you very, very much. And obviously to all our members and for you for being here today, absolutely fantastic. I just want to add a couple of words. I'm far from an expert on this. I'll be very, very brief, as I said. But I think in the last 2 years, there's two phrases that I've heard over and over and over again. And they're phrases that stick out because I don't think I'd ever heard them before. The first is, I think you're on mute. And the second is energy transition. Right? And I'd like to talk a little about energy transition and take a word from my boss, Victor. Victor, I think, mentioned 3 or 4 times the word responsibility and doing it responsibly. And this was we had another event yesterday where Victor talked a lot about that. So from Britcham's perspective, I think we have a responsibility providing a forum like we have today, physical events where we can all talk and start thinking about these solutions. But may I challenge, I think, each of you in this room, I think independent of how much you know about this transition and the challenges we have, I think you all also have this responsibility to learn and build knowledge about these challenges we have, because I think the one message that permeated through all of the sessions today was that there is not one solution. I think Adriano said there was no silver bullet. I heard Monique talk about a solution that's plus, 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 plus. I think I heard a phrase recently that we're way past the time for energy transition to pick a winner. It's been and gone. We now need all of the solutions to be able to meet our targets in 2050. And I loved what Monique said about let's be good Brazilians about this. To meet our targets in 2050, let's not start in 2049 after Carnival, right? Let's start this now. We have to start this now. So as a society, I think each of us is responsible for helping find these solutions because there's a number of them needed. So I'll end just with a shameless plug here for Britcham. I mean, it's great to be back in presential events like this. I think this is part of the solution. But in the last 2 years, I think we've done over 150 webinars with Britcham. And all of these webinars and today's event are available on our channel, our YouTube channel. This YouTube channel, I was looking at it the other day, absolutely fantastic. If you want to learn a little bit more about the energy transition or any subject, actually, we have over 12 committees in all sorts of industries. All of those videos are there. And I'd just like to take opportunity just to suggest one in particular, talking about energy transition. If you want to really understand the Brazilian energy market and the size of the challenge, where we are and where we're going, I suggest a webinar that Thiago Barral did. It was in December of last year. Fabio led this thing. It was absolutely fantastic. I was looking at it this morning on the way in here. If do yourself a favor, if you want an overview or want a real lesson in 1 hour about the energy sector in Brazil and the perspectives of the energy sector in Brazil, absolutely fantastic. So that's my shameless plug for Britcham. This presentation will be posted as well, together with all of those others. So no further ado, thank you very much, all of you, for the event today, and have a great lunch.